Michael, I was wondering if you could tell us about the centrality of the ballistic missiles within Iran's broader missile, development and weapons capabilities in general. I mean, is this essentially the threat? I mean, are there other types of Iranian missiles that we should be concerned about, and how do we assess the relative risk posed by those different types of programs?
Yeah. Right now, ballistic missiles are kind of the cornerstone of Iran's strategic deterrent warfighting capability. They also have cruise missile programs, and I'll get to that in a little bit of a moment. They have two systems that they're working on, Ya Ali and Sumar. It's not clear that they're deployed, though, at this point. But they pose a different type of challenge because, as Benham said before, they basically use aerodynamic kind of principles to basically hug the earth. And for that reason, they might be harder to intercept than ballistic missiles that have a kind of a higher arc of travel. But pulling back and looking at the role of missiles in Iran's kind of way of war, missiles really are central to the way Iran thinks about deterrence and warfighting. There are three elements, or what I say, Iran has a deterrence warfighting triad, which consists of three elements: their ability to disrupt traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, use of proxies for terrorism and subversion, and long-range strike capabilities. And missiles are central to all of these. Missiles, of course, are the main component of their long-range strike capability, missiles and rockets. Missiles are also important for their proxies and for their proxies' way of war. So whether you're talking about Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, which is not really a proxy, but a kind of a partner whose relationship with Iran has waxed and waned, and likewise with the Houthis, they've provided missile and rocket capabilities to all three for them to use on their own and also to use to advance Iranian interests. So missiles and rockets are critical for their proxies, and likewise for their efforts to disrupt traffic through the Strait of Hormuz. That relies mainly on mines, submarines, small attack craft, but also increasingly missiles. They're developing missiles. Let me just say also that it's also part of their strategy of encirclement. What they're trying to do vis-a-vis their main enemies, Israel and Saudi Arabia and the Emirates now, is just as they feared encirclement in the past from the United States, they're now trying to encircle America's main allies in the region. So you have, in Israel, you have Hezbollah to the north, armed by Iran largely, to a great extent, with missiles. Hamas developing a rocket capability thanks to Iran. Hezbollah and Iran trying to create a front in the Golan, which will probably have a missile component. And then we're seeing now with the Saudis and the Emiratis have to deal with the actual use of missiles by the Houthis from Yemen. So this is part of also their strategy of encirclement vis-a-vis America's allies in the region. And then finally, I'll just say that missiles are very much important and are very much a part of Iran's psychological approach to psychological warfare. For them, psychological warfare plays a central element in their kind of the use of instruments of national power, much more than for us. They believe that the psychological dimension often is the decisive kind of line of operation for them, and a lot of what they do in the military domain is to demoralize and undermine the confidence of their enemies. So they do lots of military parades with missiles. And what's a parade without a missile in Tehran? And in all these parades, they always have banners that death to America, Israel should be wiped off the map. So again, this is part of their psychological warfare, and it's very important. And plus, on a subliminal level, because they've signed this kind of nuclear accord, they can't, talk about their latent or kind of perhaps future nuclear capability. But when people see missiles, I think on a subliminal level, they see the missiles and they think nuclear weapons.
So just very quickly, do you see a bigger threat from Iran's own use, deployment, launch of missiles, or from the potential use by its proxies and affiliated groups?
Well, actually, for instance, take Israel. Actually, the threat to Israel is from Hezbollah is much greater than it is from Iran, simply because Hezbollah can provide, by the Israeli estimates, between 100 to 150,000 rockets and missiles. Most of these are rockets. Most of these are artillery rocket systems like Katyushas and the like. But with that kind of mass, in addition to the accurate high-end systems that they're getting from Iran, they could really, and let me just say, accuracy with missiles, accuracy is a function of range. And Hezbollah is a lot closer to Israel than Iran right now, at least with currently deployed systems. That's the way it is. So Hezbollah actually provides a greater threat to Israel than Iran because they have mass in numbers and they are increasingly having accuracy, and they'll be able to probably overwhelm Israeli defenses. So right now, in many ways, Hezbollah is a greater missile and rocket threat, thanks to Iran, to Israel, than Iran is. Iran is more manageable, but still, even Iran has missiles in numbers that would saturate probably or be really challenge Israeli defenses.
آنچه در مورد ما میگویند.